Montreal, 1975. The city, sprawling on the banks of the St. Lawrence River, was bustling with life. The streets were filled with the sounds of French and English, creating a unique atmosphere of cultural diversity. Spring was gradually taking hold, and city dwellers were eagerly awaiting warmth after the long Canadian winter. In the southwestern part of the city lay the district of Pointe-Saint-Charles, or simply the Point, as it was affectionately called by locals. This was one of the oldest neighborhoods in Montreal, with a rich history and a tight-knit community. Here, everyone knew their neighbor, and children played carefree in the streets until late in the evening. No one suspected that this quiet, peaceful corner of Montreal would soon become the site of a tragedy that would shake the entire city and remain an unsolved mystery for decades to come. Sharon Kim Prior was born on February 9, 1959, to Yvonne and George Prior. Yvonne, originally from England, had moved to Canada as a child with her parents. There, she met George, who served in the Canadian Armed Forces. The young couple fell in love quickly, got married, and Sharon became their firstborn. From early childhood, Sharon showed extraordinary kindness and caring. She adored animals and often brought home stray kittens and puppies which she fed and nursed. This love for our smaller brothers defined her dream: to become a veterinarian. At school, Sharon was a diligent student, albeit a bit shy. She found her passion in sports, joining the Boys and Girls Club where she played floor hockey. Besides sports, the girl was fascinated by art and crafts. Despite her parents' divorce in 1965, Sharon remained a cheerful child. She helped her mother take care of her younger twin sisters, Doreen and Maureen, and brother Georgie. The family settled in the Pointe-Saint-Charles area, where Sharon quickly gained a reputation as a responsible and kind girl. In her teenage years, Sharon, like many of her peers, became fascinated with music, especially the work of Elton John. She started dating a boy named John, whom she had been in love with since 4th grade. Life seemed beautiful, and the future looked promising for young Sharon Prior. Saturday, March 29, 1975, began as an ordinary spring day. Sharon woke up early, as always. She made her bed and went down to the kitchen, where her mother, Yvonne, was already preparing breakfast. There was a special excitement in the air that day. Easter was approaching and the Prior family was preparing for the celebration. After breakfast, Sharon helped her mother clear the table. Yvonne still had a lot to do. She needed to buy groceries for the holiday dinner and gifts for the children. While her mother was out, Sharon decided to paint eggs for her younger siblings. The girl carefully prepared paints and decorations. She boiled 8 eggs and started painting them, trying to make each one special. When Yvonne returned from the store, Sharon was still immersed in her task. She had managed to paint only half of each egg, leaving them to dry so she could finish the work later. Around 3:45 p.m., Sharon told her mother that she was going to the Boys and Girls Club to pick up her Leo's Boys jacket. This jacket was special. It was given to children who had sold a certain number of lottery tickets to support the club. Sharon had worked hard to earn this jacket and was now eagerly waiting for it. Unfortunately, when Sharon arrived at the club, it turned out that jackets in her size were not available. This upset the girl, but she didn't show it. Instead, she took a jacket for her friend and dropped it off at her house. Returning home, Sharon continued painting eggs. At 4:30 p.m., a local priest visited them, bringing the children a box of chocolate candies in the shape of turtles. The next 45 minutes were spent talking about Easter while Sharon finished her work. In the evening, the whole family, Sharon, her mother Yvonne, younger sisters and brother, grandmother, and Doug, the man Yvonne was dating, sat down for dinner. Yvonne had prepared a stew, which the children didn't really like but ate anyway. After dinner, Sharon helped wash the dishes and then asked permission to go to Marina's Pizzeria, a popular hangout for teenagers, which was only 5 blocks from their house. Yvonne didn't object. She trusted her responsible daughter. Around 6 p.m., a friend came to Sharon to spend time with her while she was getting ready. The girls talked and joked while Sharon was choosing what to wear. Eventually, she borrowed a sweater from her mother and put on her favorite suede jacket. At 7 p.m., Sharon said goodbye to her mother and left the house with her friend. It was drizzling outside, and Sharon was a bit worried about her suede jacket, but Yvonne reassured her, saying it was just a light rain. No one could have predicted that this would be the last time Yvonne saw her daughter alive. When the clock struck 11 p.m. and Sharon still hadn't returned home, Yvonne began to worry. This was uncharacteristic of her daughter. She always adhered to curfew, or at least called if she was running late. Yvonne tried to calm herself with the thought that Sharon might have been so engrossed in conversation with friends that she lost track of time. At 1:30 a.m., Yvonne's concern grew into real panic. She stood by the living room window, peering into the darkness, hoping to see her daughter's approaching silhouette. Sharon's younger sisters, Doreen and Maureen, were also awake, looking out from their second-floor bedroom window. When morning came, and Sharon still hadn't returned, Yvonne began calling her friends. None of them had seen Sharon the previous evening. She hadn't shown up at Marina's Pizzeria as planned. Friends suggested she might have gone to a hockey game with John and his company, but when they contacted them, it turned out Sharon wasn't there either. Yvonne's heart sank when she received a call from Sharon's friend, Mary. She reported disturbing news. Around 7:30 p.m., not far from the pizzeria, a 23-year-old woman named Cheryl Roy had been attacked by an unknown man with a knife. Fortunately, the attacker was scared off by a passerby. The description of the criminal, a white man with blue eyes and a mustache, dressed in a dark blue jacket and black shoes, made Yvonne's blood run cold. Without wasting time, Yvonne went to the police. Soon, the entire neighborhood was on its feet. Hundreds of volunteers, neighbors, friends, just concerned Montreal residents, took to the streets to help search for Sharon. They put up flyers with her photo, questioned passers-by, searched parks and abandoned buildings. Yvonne appeared on television, begging those who might be holding her daughter to return her home safe and sound. Her emotional appeal touched the hearts of many viewers, and the number of volunteers joining the search increased. The police thoroughly questioned everyone who might have seen Sharon that evening. They checked alibis of suspects, analyzed surveillance camera footage, although there weren't many in 1975, tried to reconstruct the girl's route. Days passed, but no traces of Sharon were found. Some began to suggest that she might have run away from home, but family and close friends categorically rejected this version. Sharon had no reason to run away. She loved her family, had good relationships with friends and her boyfriend. Moreover, she hadn't taken any money or personal belongings with her. Tension in the Pointe Saint-Charles area grew with each passing day. Parents were afraid to let their children out on the street. Neighbors looked at each other with suspicion. A place that had always been considered safe suddenly became a source of fear and uncertainty. The morning of April 1st, 1975 began for Yvonne Prior, like the previous days, with anxious anticipation. At 6 o'clock in the morning, she noticed an acquaintance named Ronnie knocking on the neighbor's door. He had a newspaper under his arm. Sensing something was wrong, Yvonne went out into the street. Without saying a word, she snatched the newspaper from Ronnie's hands. He shouted, "No, Yvonne, don't look." But it was too late. On the front page, Yvonne saw a photo of a body found in the snow. Although the face wasn't visible, the mother immediately recognized her daughter's shoes. Sharon's body was discovered early that morning by beekeeper Jacques Bertrand in Longueuil, a city on the opposite bank of the St. Lawrence River, about 25 minutes' drive from Pointe Saint-Charles. Bertrand had come to check on his apiary after a report of open gates and found the girl's body. The police quickly cordoned off the crime scene. Sharon was dressed only in a suede jacket and blue sweater, with socks and shoes on her feet. Her jeans were lying a few meters away from the body, and her underwear was hanging on a nearby branch. In the girl's hair, they found a partially chewed ribbon, possibly used as a gag. In Sharon's hand, she was tightly clutching a branch, indicating her desperate struggle for life. Investigators found several important pieces of evidence. 15 meters from the body, they discovered tire tracks and a bloody trail leading to where Sharon was lying. The absence of drag marks and dirt on the victim's shoes indicated that she was likely carried from a vehicle. Near the body, they found a man's shirt size 17 with 34-inch sleeves, which they believed was used to tie the victim's hands. By the gate, they found a clear imprint of a right shoe size 8.5. They also found a receipt for a Leo's Boys jacket with Sharon Prior's name on it. This horrific discovery shocked the entire Montreal community. The dreams and hopes of a young girl, her plans for the future, all of this was ruthlessly destroyed. Now, investigators face the task of finding the person responsible for this terrible crime. After the discovery of Sharon Prior's body, Montreal police launched a large-scale investigation. Detectives carefully examined every detail, trying to piece together a complete picture of what happened on the night of March 29th to 30th. The autopsy results showed that death occurred approximately 20 hours before the body was discovered. This meant that Sharon had been held somewhere for several days. Experts found numerous injuries on the girl's body, including signs of sexual violence. The cause of death was strangulation. Investigators focused on analyzing evidence found at the crime scene. The shirt, likely used to tie Sharon's hands, was sent for examination. The shoe print and tire tracks were carefully studied and compared with databases. The police conducted hundreds of interviews. They talked to Sharon's friends, her classmates, neighbors, and anyone who might have seen her on the day of her disappearance. Special attention was paid to Cheryl Roy, the victim of an attack that occurred shortly before Sharon's disappearance. Her testimony could be key to solving the case. One of the first suspects was Frank Daly, the manager of Marina's Pizzeria. He was interrogated but had an alibi for the time of Sharon's disappearance. They also checked Jacques Bertrand, the beekeeper who found the body, and his partner, Roger Auger. Although their suspicions were dismissed, the police continued to thoroughly check everyone who might have been involved in the crime. Investigators developed a profile of the likely perpetrator. They believed it could be a young man, aged 20 to 30, possibly a local resident. They suspected he had a criminal past, and this was likely not his first crime. Despite intensive investigation, progress was slow. Each new day without a decisive clue increased the likelihood that the case might remain unsolved. Meanwhile, the Pointe Saint-Charles community was in shock. The neighborhood, known for its safety and friendly atmosphere, suddenly became the site of a terrible crime. Parents were afraid to let their children out on the street, and neighbors looked at each other with suspicion. On April 4, 1975, Sharon's funeral was held. More than 200 people gathered at St. Matthew's Church to say goodbye to the girl whose life had ended so tragically. Yvonne Prior, leaning on the support of family and friends, tried to stay strong, but her grief was immeasurable. The police continued to work on the case, promising not to stop until the culprit was found. But as weeks and then months passed without significant progress, hope for a quick resolution of the crime began to fade. After the intensive initial investigation, the Sharon Prior case gradually moved into the cold case category. Despite police efforts, no decisive evidence was found that would allow them to identify and arrest the killer. Over the next few years, investigators periodically returned to the case, checking new leads and versions. They continued to interview potential witnesses, analyze old evidence in light of new forensic methods, but a breakthrough did not come. For the Prior family, these years were filled with pain and uncertainty. Yvonne, Sharon's mother, never lost hope for solving the crime. She regularly approached the police, reminding them about her daughter's case, and sought any new information that could help the investigation. Sharon's sisters, Doreen and Maureen, grew up in the shadow of tragedy. They tried to live normal lives, but the absence of their sister and the pain of her loss were always present. The younger brother, Georgie, who was still little at the time of Sharon's death, grew up knowing his older sister only from stories and photographs. In 1981, 6 years after Sharon's death, another tragedy occurred that reminded people of the unsolved case. 12-year-old Tammy Leakey disappeared just a few blocks from where Sharon was last seen. Her body was found the next day, and the circumstances of her death were very similar to Sharon's case. This sparked speculation about a possible serial killer operating in the area, and again drew attention to Sharon's unsolved case. During these years, several other unsolved murders of young women occurred in and around Montreal. Each such case made investigators return to Sharon's case, looking for possible connections. In the 1990s, the development of DNA analysis technologies gave new hope for solving old cases. However, when investigators tried to apply these methods to Sharon's case, they faced a problem. Many physical pieces of evidence collected at the crime scene had been lost or destroyed over years of storage. Despite this, Yvonne Prior did not give up. She became an activist, advocating for better investigation methods and evidence preservation in murder cases. Her story inspired other families of unsolved crime victims to unite and demand justice for their loved ones. In 1995, on the 20th anniversary of Sharon's death, a local newspaper published a large article about the case. This again drew public attention to the unsolved murder and forced the police to review all case materials once more. At the end of the 1990s, as the new millennium approached, the Sharon Prior case remained one of the most famous unsolved cases in Montreal's history. It became a symbol of unfinished justice and a reminder of how one act of violence can forever change the lives of many people. But even after so many years without answers, hope still flickered. New technologies and investigation methods that were emerging gave reason to believe that one day the truth about what happened to Sharon Prior would finally be revealed. With the dawn of the new millennium, new hope emerged in the Sharon Prior case. The development of DNA analysis technologies opened up new possibilities for solving old, cold cases. In 2000, Yvonne Prior approached the police with a request to review the evidence in her daughter's case using new DNA analysis methods. To her great disappointment, It turned out that most of the physical evidence collected in 1975 had been lost or destroyed. This was a painful blow for the family and caused public outrage. However, not all was lost. Some of Sharon's clothing items and the man's shirt found at the crime scene had been preserved. In 2001, these items were sent for DNA analysis. Experts managed to isolate a DNA profile that didn't belong to Sharon. This was the first real breakthrough in the case in many years. In 2004, the police received anonymous information about a garage where Sharon was allegedly held. A thorough search was conducted, DNA samples were taken, but unfortunately, they didn't match the profile found on the victim's clothing. Throughout this decade, investigators continued to work on the case, using new forensic methods. They reviewed old testimonies, looked for new witnesses, analyzed similar crimes that had occurred in the region. In 2007, a special unit was created to investigate unsolved murders in the Montreal area. The Sharon Prior case was one of the priorities for this group. They began systematically reviewing all aspects of the case, using modern profiling and evidence analysis methods. 2008 brought another glimmer of hope. Thanks to advancements in DNA analysis technologies, experts managed to obtain a more complete genetic profile of the perpetrator from the available evidence. This profile was entered into the National DNA Database, but no matches were found. Despite the lack of a decisive breakthrough, these years brought renewed interest in the case and new possibilities for solving it. Yvonne Prior and her family continued their fight for justice, appearing in the media and working with organizations that support families of unsolved crime victims. By the end of the decade, although Sharon's killer still remained unknown, there was real hope that with the development of technologies and the tireless work of investigators, this long saga might finally find its conclusion. The second decade of the 21st century brought revolutionary changes in the methods of investigating cold cases. The key factor was the emergence of genetic genealogy, a method that combines traditional DNA analysis with the study of family histories and public genealogical databases. In 2012, an anonymous donor increased the reward for information about Sharon Prior's killer to $10,000. This led to the creation of a new dedicated phone line for receiving information and renewed public interest in the case. In 2015, investigators decided to apply the genetic genealogy method to Sharon's case. The DNA profile obtained from the evidence was compared with data from public genealogical databases. Although no direct match was found, this work provided some clues about possible family connections of the perpetrator. In 2018, a new detective assigned to work on the case began a systematic review of all evidence and testimonies. He paid special attention to Sharon's genes, which had not been fully analyzed before due to technological limitations of that time. 2019 brought an important breakthrough. Thanks to advanced DNA analysis methods, experts managed to obtain a more complete genetic profile from Sharon's genes. This profile turned out to be identical to the one found on the man's shirt from the crime scene, but now it was much more detailed. In 2020, using this updated profile and genetic genealogy methods, investigators were able to narrow down the circle of suspects to several families. They began a thorough investigation of the genealogical trees of these families, looking for potential suspects who matched the killer's profile. 2021 became decisive. Y chromosome DNA analysis of the perpetrator pointed to a family with the surname Romaine. Investigators focused their attention on men from this family who could have been in Montreal in 1975. This work required enormous effort and time. Investigators reviewed old address books, school records, employment documents, trying to find a connection between the Romaine family and Montreal in the mid-1970s. By the end of 2021, investigators had a list of several potential suspects. They began the process of elimination, checking alibis and gathering additional information about each of them. Although the case still remained unsolved, the feeling that the resolution was close was stronger than ever in the past 46 years. Yvonne Prior, who was now over 80, waited with hope for news that could finally bring her and her family long-awaited relief. 2022 became a turning point in the Sharon Prior case. The intensive work of investigators focused on the Romaine family finally brought results. In June, detectives discovered that one of the Romaine brothers, Franklin May Westover Romaine, had a criminal past and was in Montreal in 1975. Born in 1946 in West Virginia, Franklin had a long history of offenses, including theft and assault. Further investigation showed that in February 1974, Franklin was arrested for assaulting a woman in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Released on bail, he fled to Canada, where he continued his criminal activities. Investigators found 2 addresses in Montreal associated with Franklin Romaine. One was approximately 10 kilometers from Sharon's home, and the other was in the area where her body was found. This matched the profile of the killer who knew the area well. It was also established that Franklin drove a dark red Rambler car. Experts confirmed that the tire tracks found at the crime scene could belong to such a vehicle. Franklin's physical description, a tall man with a mustache and reddish hair, matched the description of the attacker who assaulted Cheryl Roy shortly before Sharon's disappearance. In December 2022, 2 of Franklin's brothers, Noah and Michael Romaine, agreed to provide samples of their DNA for analysis. The results showed a partial match with the DNA found on Sharon's clothing. Genetic analysis indicated that with a probability of 1 in 140 billion, their brother Franklin was the sought-after killer. Noah and Michael were not surprised by this discovery. They described Franklin as a violent person with whom they were never close. Family relationships finally deteriorated after Franklin tried to attack one of the brothers' wives. However, there was one problem. Franklin Romaine had died in 1982 at the age of 36 under unclear circumstances. His body was buried in West Virginia. For final confirmation of the killer's identity, investigators turned to West Virginia authorities with a request to allow exhumation of Franklin Romaine's body to obtain a DNA sample. This discovery was a huge breakthrough in a case that had remained unsolved for almost 5 decades. For the Prior family, it was a mixture of relief and pain. They finally knew the name of the person responsible for Sharon's death, but also realized that he had escaped justice, dying many years ago. 2023 brought the long-awaited conclusion to the Sharon Prior case. After obtaining a court order, on May 2nd, Franklin Romaine's body was exhumed at Pine Grove Cemetery in West Virginia. The exhumation procedure was complicated due to the close proximity of Franklin's grave to his mother's. Investigators worked with utmost caution to avoid disturbing neighboring burials. Samples of Franklin Romaine's bone tissue were sent to a laboratory in Canada for DNA analysis. Experts were able to obtain a complete genetic profile and compare it with the DNA found on Sharon Prior's clothing. On May 23, 2023, the Montreal police officially announced the resolution of the case. Franklin Romaine's DNA fully matched the DNA of Sharon Prior's killer. The probability of error was virtually zero. This discovery allowed authorities to link Romaine to at least 4 rapes committed during his lifetime. Investigators also suspected his involvement in other unsolved murders, both in the United States and Canada. For the Prior family, this news was a moment of mixed emotions. 85-year-old Yvonne Prior, upon hearing about the case being solved, broke into tears but said she felt relief from finally knowing the truth. Sharon's sisters, Doreen and Maureen, expressed gratitude to the police and genetic genealogy experts for their tireless work. They noted that while this wouldn't bring their sister back, knowing that her killer could no longer harm anyone brought some comfort. At the press conference, the Prior family stated, "We still mourn the loss of our daughter and sister, who was brutally murdered at the age of 16. Our life since then has not been easy, but Sharon has given us strength over the past 48 years, and especially today. Sharon is here with us." The solving of Sharon Prior's case became a symbol of hope for many families whose loved ones were victims of unsolved crimes. It demonstrated that even after decades of uncertainty, justice can prevail. Franklin May Westover Romaine was born in 1946 in West Virginia. His life was filled with legal troubles from an early age. Already in his teenage years, he began committing petty thefts and robberies. In 1964 and 1965, Romaine escaped from prison twice, demonstrating his disregard for the law. His crimes were mostly limited to burglaries and robberies, but in February 1974, he crossed a line by attacking a woman in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Released on bail, Romaine fled to Canada to avoid trial. In Montreal, he continued his criminal activities. It was during this period, in March 1975, that Sharon Prior's murder occurred. In October 1975, 6 months after Sharon's murder, Romaine was arrested and extradited back to West Virginia. In 1978, he was sentenced to a term of 5 to 10 years in prison for the 1974 assault. However, Romaine was released early in 1981, having already served the minimum term, taking into account the time spent in jail before trial. After his release, he briefly returned to Canada. In 1982, at the age of only 36, Franklin Romaine died under unclear circumstances. His body was returned to West Virginia for burial. Romaine's life was filled with violence and crime. His own family described him as a cruel person whom everyone avoided. An attempt to attack one of his brother's wives finally alienated him from his family. The revelation of his involvement in Sharon Prior's murder showed how dangerous he was. Investigators suspect that he might have been responsible for other unsolved crimes both in the United States and Canada. Franklin Romaine's story is a tragic example of how one person can bring so much grief and suffering to others, remaining undetected for decades. The official announcement of solving Sharon Prior's case triggered a wave of emotions in the family and the entire Montreal community. For Yvonne Prior, Sharon's mother, it was a moment of long-awaited relief. At 85 years old, she finally got the answers she had been seeking for almost 5 decades. "I always knew this day would come," she told journalists, barely holding back tears. Sharon's sisters, Doreen and Maureen, expressed mixed feelings. "We're grateful for the tireless work of the police and experts, but this doesn't bring Sharon back," they stated. However, knowing that her killer can no longer harm anyone brings some comfort. The Pointe Saint-Charles community, which remembered the 1975 tragedy, reacted with deep sympathy for the Prior family. Many local residents left flowers near the Priors' former home as a sign of respect for Sharon's memory. The Montreal police held a press conference where they detailed the investigation process and the role of genetic genealogy in solving the case. Detectives emphasized the importance of new technologies in solving cold cases. Criminology and genetics experts commented on this case as an example of how modern methods can help restore justice even decades after a crime. The solving of Sharon Prior's case became a symbol of hope for many families whose loved ones were victims of unsolved crimes. It served as a reminder of the importance of not giving up and continuing to seek the truth, regardless of how much time has passed. Local politicians used this opportunity to call for increased funding for investigating cold cases and implementing new technologies in law enforcement work. Overall, the resolution of Sharon Prior's case became a moment of collective catharsis for a community that had lived with this unresolved tragedy for decades. The solving of Sharon Prior's murder after 48 years of uncertainty left a deep mark on society and the criminal justice system. This case became a catalyst for changes in legislation and police practice. New laws were passed requiring better preservation of evidence in murder cases to avoid losing important clues, as happened in Sharon's case. The success of using genetic genealogy led to increased funding and expanded application of this technology for solving other cold cases. Many police departments across Canada created special units dedicated to such long, unsolved crimes. The memory of Sharon Prior continues to live on. An annual scholarship in her name, established by the Boys and Girls Club, helps young people fulfill their dreams of higher education. Sharon's story has become the subject of several books and documentaries, which not only tell about the tragedy but also emphasize the importance of relentless pursuit of justice and the development of forensic technologies. For the Prior family, solving the case brought long-awaited closure, but also reminded them of the undiminished pain of loss. They continue to advocate for other families of unsolved crime victims, giving them hope and support. The Sharon Prior case will forever remain a reminder that time is not an obstacle to justice, and that even the oldest and most complex crimes can be solved through persistence, dedication, and innovation.